Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. The following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffone.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffone.
Is Bill Lazor a good play caller, or is Matt Nagy such a bad play caller that it makes average look like Bill Walsh?
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now, it's his nephew, John, and there's no holding this Buffone back either.
What the Bears are right now is what has been wrong with them for over 30 years. Just aim to be competitive and do your best to be average. And maybe we should just accept that, because the front office sure as hell did.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me.
The games have been close because the defense, your offense, which you came in to revolutionize, has gotten worse as the years go by.
It's Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach at breaking down those Chicago Bears. I'm your host, John Buffone, and with me, as always, is my producer and co-host, Alyssa. The Bears get to follow up one primetime game with another primetime game. How excited are you?
I just want to say I'm thrilled that the country gets to see the Bears on primetime and back-to-back weeks, because they're just a team that you want to see in primetime and back-to-back weeks. No, I mean, because we saw how well that went last week. I mean, they were entertaining for a half. Maybe we get the same thing, but we know how this ends.
Yeah, and I'm just tired of having to share the national spotlight where all football fans get to weigh in with their opinions of the Bears as if we haven't been watching them all year and we know what they are, but people have to just chime in and let Bears fans know how bad the team is. Yeah, we get it. But we have an awesome guest to help break down the Bears' next opponent, the Minnesota Vikings, a division rival that is still in the hunt for a playoff spot. But just in case this is your first time listening or watching Buffone 55, Alyssa, could you tell our beloved listeners and viewers how the show works?
Of course, and how lucky for the Vikings. Good for them. Buffone 55 has 3 segments, and we start off with our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions, and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55 is John's way of paying tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, his mentor, and a man who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. That's then followed by learning about the Bears' upcoming opponent from someone who follows them closely. And today we are thrilled to have Matthew Coller, who covers the Vikings at Purple Insider Pod over on Blue Wire. We then finish things up by going into Buffone's basement, where Aldo Gandia joins us, and we have a Bears therapy session and get out our feelings, which there are a lot of after that Packers game. So, John, I know this team takes a lot out of you, and you've had a long day, but are you ready for this?
I'm ready. I mean, I'll try to put in the same type of effort that the Bears put in, so I hope that doesn't scare anybody away.
No, I think you'll put in more. So, John, the Bears almost looked like they had a shot Sunday night when they went into the locker room at halftime against the Packers. We talked about Bears fans being apathetic heading into this game, but what was this game like in your house? 55 seconds are on the clock.
Well, listen, I did my best to keep myself from feeling anything because I didn't want my heart to get broken. But when they went up 10-0, I did everything I could to just, really center myself. And then they go up 2 scores. I'm thinking, okay. Then the Packers go up 14-10. I settled down. I figured the universe was evening itself up. Then the Damiere Byrd touchdown happened. Jakeem Grant takes a punt 97 yards back to the house. And I started thinking, hey, the universe can go kick rocks. The Bears might be in this. Then less than a minute later, the Packers scored. So honestly, there was a big part of me that thought what the Bears were doing in the first half just wasn't sustainable. And it turned out it just wasn't sustainable. They got outscored 24-3 in the second half. And the harsh reality hit everyone eventually that the Bears are a bad football team. So they found a way to suck us back in before aggressively spitting us back out. Bears fans, beware. It's a trap.
It always is. I mean, like heading into this game, I honestly thought that it would be over after the first quarter when you kind of look at where the Packers are and where the Bears are. And I mean, they surprised me, right? I mean, that was an entertaining first half. Or like Matt Nagy said, he had a lot of fun. Probably as much in the second half. But, kind of like watching the first half, I was like, you know what? I know this is going to end badly because we've seen this movie 1,000 times with this rivalry, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to enjoy it, right? And eventually, like seeing Jakeem Grant and Damiere Byrd, you finally got to see the speed that the Bears had brought in the receiving cores. And it was like, wow, it only took 14 weeks, but here it is. But, at this point of the season where you've won 4 games and lost 9, I mean, you have to kind of enjoy the little things, like the small victories, right? It was nice seeing Jakeem Grant get, an NFC Special Teams Player of the Week and get to, score a couple touchdowns. Like, man, I was screaming during that punt return. That was exciting. So, I mean, we knew it was going to end badly, but, the first half was nice.
Yeah, I have my first half championship shirt ordered. It should be here before Christmas.
Where can I get mine?
I'm going to wear it proudly. Yeah, I'm going to wear it proudly during the holidays. I'm going to put the first half score there, and they might raise a banner for it. So, you're right. Enjoy the little things.
Oh my God, they still would raise a banner for it. When we go to that end of the year press conference and, McCaskey and Phillips are sitting up there and they're going to be like, wow, we go back to that Packers game, right? And you really kind of see how they made progress in that Packers game. They were leading at halftime, which is something we couldn't say before. Like, oh my goodness, I'm waiting for that.
That's what they're going to credit all the progress for. Well, if you look over the season, we were winning in the first half against Green Bay. When you have to point to the most successful part of your season and it was leading a team at halftime, it might be time to shake things up a little bit.
Oh man, this is where we're at as Bears fans.
Yeah, it is.
So, we talked a little bit about those explosive plays, and the Bears had some against the Packers with 2 big touchdowns coming from Jakeem Grant and another by Damiere Byrd. And one name that went rather unnoticed was Allen Robinson, who he actually returned this week to the lineup. Like, he was out in the field if you saw him, and it kind of looks like he's entering his final phase as a Chicago Bear. So, John, do you think that Allen Robinson is nearing the end of his career in Chicago? Your 55 seconds start now.
To me, Allen Robinson has been the biggest mystery of the entire 2021 season. When things were bad in 2019 and 2020, the constant was Allen Robinson eating up targets and putting up top 10 numbers. I don't know why he doesn't have chemistry with Justin Fields. If I had that answer, Alyssa, I probably wouldn't be on this show talking to you. But is it scheme? Is it Justin Fields? Is he hurt? Has he been gutting out an injury? I'll admit, the clip of him not blocking for Justin Fields against the Packers looked bad. You're told to play to the whistle, so even if he thought the play was over, he should have kept moving. Look, Allen Robinson is a player I respect a lot. He could be going full diva wide receiver right now on us and publicly denouncing the team and the coaches, but for the most part, he keeps to himself. All of that being said, I don't think it matters. He is absolutely gone after this year. Did 2021 affect his bottom line when it comes to a new contract with a different team? Maybe, but that other team's going to be getting a good player on a bargain price.
Yeah, I think heading into the season, we hoped that maybe the idea of playing with Justin Fields, this young up and coming quarterback, that we thought was probably the best quarterback he's played with to this point.
Oh yeah.
Would want to entice him to come back and just to kind of see how this season's gone. And thank you, Matt Nagy, for that. It's just kind of been a disaster. And like you said, that play where he just completely gave up, I don't want to question a player's effort, but when you see something like that, it's very telling. And it kind of just seems that he's just checked out at this point. Like, he's ready for free agency. There's no way in hell that he's coming back to the Bears next year. So, I mean, I love Allen Robinson. He's a great player. He's been a great leader. And it's just kind of this season, it's just, that when Musa Muhammad said that Chicago's where receivers go to die. And I think that maybe just emotionally, this is where they come to die. And you're starting to see that with Robinson. And it's really frustrating because he's such a better player than he's shown this year. I mean, it's been really disappointing.
Yeah, I think Bears fans are disappointed, and you see them going in on Allen Robinson now on social media, and it's to the point where, remember, going into the season, everyone had Allen Robinson's back as far as pay this man, extend A-Rob, because the hashtag was all over the place, and now there's a difference of opinions, maybe because of this season, but is it effort? Maybe a little bit, I don't. But there's something else, and I wish I had something to say that was a little more tangible here because we're doing a show about this. But I really don't know what the biggest problem is. I wish I knew, but I'm sure the Bears wish they knew too. Maybe they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like everything just kind of it's just at one thing after another. Because right, you have the whole disrespect thing, but that was the same last year, right? And he still kind of showed up. Then you have his lack of the lack of chemistry with Justin Fields, like you said. I don't know what's going on there. And I mean, at the same time, I can't like fault him for being frustrated because man, this team is frustrating, and damn, Allen Robinson deserves much better than this.
It's frustrating to watch. I can't imagine being on the team.
Oh goodness, poor Allen Robinson. It's okay. You're gonna get away from this. Unfortunately, Bears fans can't say the same. So we're going to move over to coaching, which is one of our favorite discussions here. So as if there isn't enough to already criticize Matt Nagy for, social media had an absolute blast with Nagy's halftime quote that he was having, quote, he was having so much fun. Later on, Nagy always admitted that he would have rather have went for it on 4th and inches when the Bears were down 11 in the beginning of the fourth quarter. And it looks like Nagy will be the coach for at least another week. But John, are things actually getting worse, or are we just piling on Matt Nagy? The clock starts when you do.
Alyssa, truly, we are witnessing the end times. During his post-game press conferences, he just looks defeated and out of answers. Every time I hear him say something is on the table or everything is on the table, I just translate that into, I don't know, please stop asking me. And he's not doing himself any favors either. When you're the head coach of a 4-8 football team, the last thing you want your fan base to hear is that you're having a lot of fun. Even if you are having fun, keep that to yourself. Honestly, I think they should just fire the guy and stop putting him through this. I'm sure he knows his days are numbered. He can start his vacation early and still get paid. I'm sure he wouldn't mind not getting publicly ridiculed every single day of his life. Plus, the Bears need some sort of jolt to their system. The league did vote to allow teams that conduct head coaching interviews in the last 2 weeks of the season. And if the Chicago Bears don't utilize that, they are fools. This is probably what is actually best for both sides, both the Bears and Matt Nagy, to just be done with it as quickly as possible.
And I get it, Matt. That first half was super fun, but I mean, while you were busy having fun, Matt LaFleur and his team are busy making a halftime adjustments that you weren't able to do and you haven't been able to do. So it's just kind of I feel like this game was an exclamation point. It's a microcosm of everything that's kind of been wrong with Matt Nagy. And it just kind of felt like the bow, right? The icing on the cake. And I thought if there was any time that you could part ways with Matt Nagy, even though they did kind of hang in there in the first half, the second half collapse would have been reason enough and would have been perfect for them to part ways with Nagy. So, I mean, at this point, I think that we're stuck with him the rest of the season, barring some just disastrous meltdown. I don't know. Do you get blown out by the Giants? Maybe that's enough. I don't even see that happening, considering it's probably going to be Mike Glennon at quarterback. But at this point, it just kind of seems like we have to deal with him for another month, which, I mean, as a writer, I'm happy about because it gives me plenty to write about.
Yeah. Well, it's like everyone in the Bears organization needs some sort of media training because it's the same thing as, Ted Phillips saying they have a culture that everyone's striving for. It's Matt Nagy saying that, he's having fun. It just reminds me of that Rex Grossman using New Year's Eve as an excuse of why they lost a game that one year. I know it doesn't directly impact the game or directly impact your team. But when your fans are already coming after you, you don't want to throw them any fresh meat and say, now you can come after me for this. And now you can ridicule me for this. You just say, we had a good first half. We're going to make the proper adjustments. Even if you have no plans on making the proper adjustments, you say that and you just say, we're going to keep our feet. We're going to keep our foot on the gas and we're going to try to finish this game out strong. Be like, hey, I'm having fun. All right. Hey guys, Bears fans, you having fun. And then they're 4-8 and now we're 4-9. So, and all of those things can come back and bite you. Maybe he doesn't care but there needs to be a little bit of a awareness there.
From the moment that sideline reporter was like, Matt Nagy said he's having so much fun, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're doomed. Like, any chance they had in the second half was completely gone after that. I'm like, this is going to end disastrously, and this quote's going to come back around, and it didn't. It's just been, you put on any sports talk radio in Chicago the day after or 2 days after, and you're hearing that. It's just, oh, man, poor, like you said, with Matt Nagy at this point, you want the guy to just like get rid of him so that he doesn't have to deal with this for another month, because it's a lot of stuff coming at him and it's not going to slow down. In fact, as we get closer to the end of the season, it's going to ramp up until they actually do something about it.
And if I were Matt Nagy, you don't want to resign because you don't want to feel like you're quitting on anybody, but you're almost thinking, well, can't they just let me go? I can start my off season a month early. I can go on vacation. I'm still going to get paid. It's probably best for the Bears organization to move on and start looking over possible replacements. I just don't know why the McCaskies and the Bears organization are basically holding their fans hostage and maybe holding their head coach hostage.
I mean, you look at him after the game, and he just looks like a man that's just like he's like
defeated.
His face is red. He's defeated. He's gone. He's just like, why am I here? He's given up. White flag was waved probably a month ago at this point, and just give the guy a break. Like, let him go.
Yeah. The Bears are turning him into a sympathetic figure, which we never thought would actually happen.
My goodness, man, this season is surprising for sure.
Yeah.
And as if being 4-9 wasn't enough, yes, we're one loss away from double-digit losses. Bears fans must be subjected to their team being trotted out onto the national stage for the second straight week. John, most fans like to watch their team in prime time, but is it actually making the 2021 season even more miserable for the Bears faithful? You have 55 seconds.
100% yes. It's one thing to have to watch this team look like trash amongst other Bears fans, but it's another thing altogether to see national pundits and football fans across the country just pick apart your team and make jokes, and then I have to listen to the commentators bloviate about how awesome the Bears' opponents are. Look, having your team play in primetime is something you should look forward to, but it just feels like the NFL is trolling Bears fans at this point by giving them so many primetime games. Quite frankly, if it weren't for the Chicago market, this team would probably get one Thursday night game per year. Then you can throw in the fact that I live on the East Coast and their Sunday and Monday night games don't finish until after 11 p.m. That means I have to lose sleep and wake up irritable because the bogus Bears get another primetime game. But you know what? The joke's on the NFL. It's week 15, playoff races are running hot, and their primetime matchup on Monday night consists of two teams that are under 500, and it's probably going to be a really boring game.
I'm with you. Like, I'm also on the East Coast. So like you said, 11:30, the game ends. And I have a lot of post-game stuff to do. I have to get the story up. I got multiple posts to get up. I don't get to bed till 1:30 or 2. I'm just like, and it's just a loss after loss after loss. It's just really frustrating. And oh man, on primetime again, it's just like they're setting them up for failure. Or at the same time, like when you see primetime, like this is an opportunity. Like if they're embarrassed again against a Vikings team that is actually fighting to make the playoffs, unlike the Bears, so they're not technically eliminated yet, but they're eliminated. So I mean, it's just like the primetime stage is just another opportunity for the Bears to be embarrassed. And hopefully maybe that leads to change. Like at this point, I think that change should happen and we're expecting it to happen, but we never know with this organization.
We've been waiting for it, Alyssa, for almost a year. And it's just like, we're just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And so honestly, it's to the point now where it's just like, I'm not even expecting it anymore. I'm thinking it should happen, but I'm just like, I'm putting it in my mind that it's just not going to happen until probably mid-January or whenever, week 18 is over. So like the second week of January is probably when it's going to happen, but I don't know why they should be waiting that long when they already know what they're going to do.
Oh man, it's just an embarrassment. John, if the Bears lose on Monday night, which is possible, they will have double-digit losses for the first time since John Fox's final year in 2017. But it seems like Bears fans punted on this team a long time ago. How did we get to this point where there are 4 games left and fans just don't seem to care? I'm curious to hear this one, so no clock, just talk. Have at it.
Well, look at the current state of the team. They're currently in 15th place in the NFC. In case you didn't know this, there's 16 teams in the NFC. So they're just above the Lions, who traded away their quarterback, and they're in a blatant rebuild. We were sold a bill of goods by the Chicago Bears front office that this team could be a contender. Well, here's a quick fact. Since 2010, the Bears are only averaging one more win per season than the Detroit Lions. Does that put some things in perspective for you? At the end of the last year, we were told the Bears needed to show progress. Well, they're going to lose double-digit games this year. The defense is aging. They have limited draft capital, and we will see the same non-competitive product on the field every single week until the end of the season. What are Bears fans supposed to be excited about? Sure, Justin Fields gives fans hope, but in the short term, Bears fans are worried he's going to get hurt or ruined by the current coaching staff. So the indifference here is deafening, and it's going to be on full display Monday night for the whole country to see. We'll be back with more Buffone 55 after this.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. Now it's time to learn a little bit more about the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm going to kick it back over to John to bring out our guest. John, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa. Here to help us learn more about the Minnesota Vikings is Matthew Coller, who covers the Vikings at Purple Insider Pod on Blue Wire. Matthew, thank you so much for being on Buffone 55. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, but I have to say that there is a tornado watch in my area, so I'm just going to keep one eye on Twitter to make sure that my house is not going to get hit by a tornado as we talk. So forgive me if I'm kind of looking both ways, or if I freak out and run out of the room, that's why.
Right. So I appreciate your playing hurt mentality here by just doing a podcast when you're in the middle of a tornado watch. So that being said, let's talk about. I'm not even going to make a bad tornado joke, but let's just talk about the Bears and the Vikings, which in itself is not nearly as exciting or gets the blood boiling. But I do want to talk about the Minnesota Vikings this season. Unlike the Bears, the Vikings are actually in the playoff hunt. I love that term, in the hunt. Can you make a case for the Vikings on why they are going to make the playoffs from the way they're playing right now?
I think that the case is more about the other teams than it is necessarily about them. I mean, Taylor Heineke is not only bad, but also is beat up. And I think there's 18 players on Washington's team that are on the COVID list right now. Philadelphia, now they play each other, which is so no matter who wins, it's bad for the Vikings, Philadelphia and Washington. But Philadelphia does not have a proven quarterback either. They have a pretty flawed football team. And then the teams that are chasing from behind, you have Atlanta is minus 118 point differential. They're a horrible team masquerading as an average team. And New Orleans has Taysom Hill. So they've basically got a tight end playing quarterback at this point. The Vikings have a proven franchise quarterback, even though there's never-ending debates about Kirk Cousins and is he good, is he not good, is he clutch, is he not clutch, all those things. But in comparison to these other quarterbacks, he's just much better than them. And I think the Vikings offense overall is better than any of the other offenses that we're talking about here. On defense, of course, the Vikings have had some serious issues, which I'm sure we'll get into. But schedule-wise, playing a team like Chicago 2 times, it basically sets you up for you need one win either against Los Angeles or Green Bay. They've already beaten Green Bay this year. So they have a chance to do that. I think that's why they have the best chance. But if you look at any of the odds people, the analytics, when they run all the different scenarios, it's pretty much everybody's got like a 1 in 3 chance. Philadelphia could get hot. They win a couple of games. They could have a better record than the Vikings at the end of the day. And the Vikings are always capable of an unbelievable meltdown in Chicago. I mean, we have seen this so many times. I was just looking at the numbers, and the Vikings have only won there in Soldier Field 5 times out of the last 20 games, I believe. I mean, that is unbelievable considering that Chicago hasn't exactly been a juggernaut over the last 20 years of success, as you guys know. So it's even against the spread, I was looking up like how many times that tries to capture, how good the teams are. And the Vikings have not performed well even against the spread in Chicago. So there's always that curse that exists or whatever it is that hovers over the Vikings where they could blow this. They lost to the Lions 2 weeks ago. But I think if you're comparing who the quarterbacks are, the fact that Justin Jefferson is here, Dalvin Cook just went for over 200 yards, you would say they have a better chance than Washington or Philly, but I don't know that it's the most convincing case I've ever made.
And surprisingly, too, the Bears are 5-1 against the Vikings with Nagy, which just doesn't make sense. I mean, I think that streak's gonna be snapped because this is just not a good football team. But you mentioned Kirk Cousins, and he's someone who has received flack around the NFL for the last few years. But like you said, he's actually provided stability at the position. And when you look at some of the other teams going for that wild card spot, and with Cousins approaching the end of his contract coming up in a couple of years, do you think that the Vikings will extend him, or do you think that they're going to start anew?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the $45 million question here as we go forward. I mean, it's something that we're talking about on a daily basis. And I don't really have a good sense for whether these final 4 games matter. I think if Kirk Cousins were to get the Vikings into the playoffs and take them deep in the playoffs, then yeah, he's their quarterback long-term. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's got a $45 million cap hit for 2022, which basically leaves them with, you can trade him or you can extend him, but playing him on a $45 million cap hit is not feasible. And that decision, I don't know if that's been made. I mean, I think that after they lost to Detroit, most people in the Vikings fan base got to a place where this can't really continue. With Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman, and Kirk Cousins as sort of your triumvirate of leadership for the organization, somebody's got to go. Something has to change. There are some people in the camp of, hey, Cousins is a good quarterback. They've just never surrounded him with enough. But I think that there's a lot of evidence that would say otherwise. In 2018, specifically that final game of the year against Chicago will live in people's memories forever. I mean, Chicago was resting starters and the Vikings couldn't find a way to win that game and get into the playoffs. And then, Chicago actually plays a role in this. You in 2018, you go to Chicago sort of looking to prove yourself. And even though the score ended up being fairly close, Chicago mostly ran him out of the building. And it was a classic like national TV nightmare for Cousins. And so if you go 4 years with the same quarterback in the NFL, think about any team like this, 4 years, if you make the playoffs one time, they're changing that quarterback, right? Like no team sticks with a quarterback that long, even if the guy's on a rookie contract. And so I think, they're probably looking at that, the ownership of saying, yeah, okay, Cousins puts up these good numbers and he is a good player. There's no doubt about it that he's better than a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. And there's a lot of teams that would take him. But can you build around Cousins with the money that you have? And can you do it soon? Like, is it worth it? Can you even win next year? Is there some button to push? Is there some trade to make or signing that takes you from this mediocre level that they've been for 4 years over the top? And I mean, it's pretty hard to find that path.
Well, someone who's not mediocre would be Dalvin Cook. He is coming off his best game against the Steelers, despite having a pretty significant shoulder injury, or significant to normal people, I'd say. But with Madison on the COVID list, how important is Cook going to be to this team? And I know this is, and I was going to ask, how is he performing with that injury? But obviously we know how he's performing with that injury. Is that going to slow him up at all?
Yeah, well, the Pittsburgh Steelers did a huge favor by never tackling him. So like the injury didn't matter because he never got hit. And I'm not kidding. Like the first half of that game, he was just not touched. And it was a credit to the Vikings blocking, which has been very spotty this year in their run blocking. In general, it's drifted off, but I don't know exactly what Pittsburgh was doing. I mean, when I looked back at the tape, there were so many baffling things in the first half from Pittsburgh that allowed Dalvin Cook to do that. It's not something that you would expect every single week the rest of the way, that he's going to run for 200 yards. And I don't know Akeem Hicks's status yet, but that will matter also, that anytime Akeem Hicks has played against the Vikings, he eats them alive. And if you look at Dalvin Cook's performances against Chicago when Akeem Hicks is playing, it's usually well below his averages. I mean, he's usually around like 3 yards a carry when the middle of that defensive line is stuffed up the way that it is. But we're also not talking about a Chicago defense that's anything like the Chicago defenses of the past that Cousins and Dalvin Cook struggled so much against. Like, this is a bad Chicago defense that I think the Vikings can take advantage of. But we really saw it when Dalvin Cook is going. It's very hard to stop the Vikings receivers. And we also don't know Adam Thielen's status yet. We'll find out tomorrow. Is he back at practice or not? But, you know, Justin Jefferson, if you could put him one-on-one in any situation, he's going to win. He's going to create big plays. And if Dalvin Cook is succeeding, it draws more attention, play action. Like, we've seen this really play out over the entire time that Kirk Cousins has been here, that when Cook has success, Cousins has success. So there are statistics and numbers that say, hey, you don't need a successful running game necessarily to hit on play action. But for this specific team, like, that has always been the case. So if Dalvin Cook gets going, it becomes very difficult for anybody to beat the Vikings.
You know, and speaking of those receivers, you said that we're going to wait to hear about Adam Thielen's status. We know the threat that Justin Jefferson presents. You know, is there another receiver or another couple of receivers on the Vikings that could potentially step up in this game?
Well, there's definitely not a couple, because several of them are on the COVID list, like everyone else in the NFL. And that's another thing, because of vaccination statuses, it's not like they post them on their website. So D.D. Westbrook, we don't know. That, you know, their special teamer is technically a receiver, Dan Chisna, but, you know, he's probably not a factor. But Westbrook would be the biggest one of someone else who could step in. KJ Osborne, though, for the Vikings has kind of been a bit of a revelation, because for years they just couldn't find another receiver behind Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, or Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. And anytime either one of those guys was out, the passing game just went down. And having KJ Osborne, he's come through in a number of clutch situations that have been really big for them. And without KJ Osborne, they probably don't beat Carolina. There's a few other games. I would say they probably blow it to Pittsburgh, because KJ Osborne caught a 62-yard touchdown that gave them a little more breathing room to not blow that game and then let a 29-point lead get away, which is kind of who their defense is. So KJ Osborne has been a really big part of this and is developed from somebody who was drafted in the 5th round, had 0 catches, 0 targets. I don't even think he had an offensive snap in his rookie year. And then all of a sudden he comes back in OTAs and mini camp and training camp. We're saying, like, who is this? Like, this is not the guy we saw last year. And so he's developed into somebody that can fill in for Adam Thielen and be trustworthy in that position. The only question is there anybody else? They're signing guys off practice squads and things like that. There really isn't. So they also don't have Irv Smith Jr. this year. So they don't have like the 2 tight end thing that they used to be able to do with Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of the fullback CJ Ham in this game, and they're trying to run play actions and deep crosses and things like that to try and get Jefferson and Osborne deep down the field, because there isn't a 3rd or 4th receiver or a 2nd tight end or somebody who's going to sort of pop up and surprise you and have a big game.
You spoke about the tight ends a little bit, and I did want to bring up Tyler Conklin, who I think is on pace to have about 60 catches this year. What has been his impact on this team, and what can Bears fans expect out of the tight end position with Minnesota?
Yeah, I think that Tyler Conklin was a guy that they liked for a long time, and he was sort of buried as the number 3 tight end behind Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith. And their offensive plan all the way until 1 week before the season was to play a ton of 2 tight end like they had before, and have Tyler Conklin essentially be Irv Smith and Irv Smith move into Kyle Rudolph's role. Smith is more of a downfield threat, but you get what I'm saying. The tight end 1, tight end 2. And then when Smith went down, it was really crushing to them, because he's a dynamic talent who had a tremendous offseason. He was standing out on a daily basis in training camp. And so losing him was a huge hit to their offense. And I think that Tyler Conklin is filled in admirably. He has tremendous hands. He had a catch against Dallas where they ran a go route down the sideline and he mossed some guy. So he has just great hands, but he's not somebody who scares you or who you look at as like this big time threat. It's more of like, oh, there's Tyler Conklin 2 or 3 times a game that shows up and every once in a while kind of catches the defense by surprise because maybe they don't expect him to go down the field or they're looking for deep shots and things like that. And here comes Conklin underneath, totally uncovered. It's not somebody though that like, we're not talking about the next coming of Antonio Gates here. This is not like the guy you put the star next to. I think he's had a very solid year. He's done a nice job, but he's not somebody that's like a game breaker or someone who your defensive staff is going to be saying, we can't let Tyler Conklin beat us. It's more of that he sort of shows up at the right time because there's so much attention on Justin Jefferson.
And a big part of Dalvin Cook's 200-yard game last week was that Minnesota offensive line. What's your evaluation of this Vikings offensive line right now? And are there any areas that the Bears can exploit?
I mean, there definitely are. They're coming off by far their best game. I mean, not even close against Pittsburgh. It certainly helped, though, that TJ Watt got hurt, I think in the first quarter or maybe the second quarter. And they had a couple of other injuries and just played really poorly early in that game. So the Vikings offensive line is probably feeling pretty good about themselves. But on the whole, it has not been a good year. I mean, if you look at the PFF rankings for pass blocking, they're all the way at the bottom as they so often are. And the run blocking has been subpar this year. And really until that Pittsburgh game, we were saying, Dalvin Cook really hasn't had the same year as he has the last couple of seasons. And a main reason is that run blocking and not having extra tight end help has certainly been a big deal. Christian Darrisaw was starting to come along. Their first round draft pick is somebody that was becoming reliable and really effective and sort of showing this high end of different size, strength, athleticism that you just, that's rare that you draft in the first round. And then he got hurt with an ankle injury. So they moved their right guard to left tackle, which is very, very difficult, but also their right guard, Oli Udoh, is really inexperienced at playing right guard and has never played left tackle. And so we've seen that play out a few times that it's just tough for him. And so if Darrisaw is not back this week, which I don't know, they didn't put him on IR, so it's possible that he could come back. Normally we'd have some more answers in the middle of the week, but the Monday night thing throws it off that we haven't been out to practice yet. But if Udoh is at left tackle, that's Chicago's chance. Is you have this extreme weakness at a very key position. And Kirk Cousins, though he has done a great job this year of not getting sacked, is always prone to the strip sack or to the big mistake. He was pressured 11 times against Pittsburgh. He went 0 for 11 passing when he was pressured. So that's kind of the one big weakness, but also the interior. If Akeem Hicks is in and if Eddie Goldman comes back off the COVID list, the interior of the Vikings offensive line is as bad as it's been before. If you guys have enjoyed watching Garrett Bradbury be picked up and walked back into the quarterback in previous years, well, you're likely to see it again. So they've improved a little at right guard by having a veteran and Mason Cole in there, but it is still an offensive line that has one really good player and everybody else is pretty spotty.
I want to switch sides of the ball now because the strength of the Bears' offensive attack would be its rushing game. Until Matt Nagy ultimately abandons it. But before that time, it's usually their strength going into the game. What can Bears fans expect out of the rush defense of the Vikings? Can the Bears have some success on the ground against Minnesota?
Yeah, I think everybody has. Now, it certainly helps that the Vikings have gotten back Michael Pierce and Delvin Tomlinson. They had to miss those guys for a couple of games. Tomlinson was on the COVID list, and Pierce had an elbow injury that kept him out. And that was a big deal for them. And they basically got steamrolled in the running game. There was a play I remember against Detroit where Jamal Williams ran for 11 yards up the middle without having anyone touch him. Like not a fingernail was laid on this man for 10 or 11 yards before the Vikings finally sort of gathered around him. That's not going to happen so much with Tomlinson and Pierce in there because those are two gigantic human beings. Where the real serious weakness for the Vikings is at defensive end. They do not have anybody who is good against the run at defensive end now that Danielle Hunter is out and Everson Griffin is away from the team. They are good sideline to sideline with Eric Hendricks and Anthony Barr, but what often happens is offensive linemen can sort of get off of their blocks, tackles get off of their blocks and get out to the the linebackers, guards, or tackles. And it's just been really tough this year for the linebackers because the defensive line has not been anywhere near as stout as it has been in years past under Mike Zimmer. And when you have those defensive ends, if you run out of the shotgun and you do sweeps and things like that to the edges, I mean, that's where most people have had a lot of success against the Vikings. It's a serious weakness, but you mentioned going away from the run. This is the one thing that head coaches and offensive coordinators have been doing against the Vikings that has cost, I think, other teams games against the Vikings is going away from the run. We saw the Chargers do this, and I think it cost the Chargers the game. They were up in the second half. They ran 2 or 3 times in a row successfully and then said, we've got to go back to Herbert. We've got to push the ball down the field. Couple incompletions later, the game swings entirely and gives Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins a chance. I think if the Bears stay with that run game and don't get impatient, that you can wear down this Vikings defensive line. And we've seen a couple of teams, especially San Francisco, did it brilliantly. You can do that against this Vikings defensive line. The other thing too is though, that the cornerbacks for the Vikings are really struggling with tackling. They have 2 of the lowest or the worst tacklers in terms of missed tackle percentage in Bashaud Breeland and Patrick Peterson. I think that's really the key to beating them is can you make those guys, can you sort of isolate those guys and make them make tackles, and then you're probably going to have success.
And the Bears have struggled protecting the quarterback this season, be it Justin Fields or Andy Dalton, and that's not exactly encouraging considering they're about to face a Vikings pass rush that has the most sacks in the NFL. Not to mention that Jason Peters, their starting left tackle, likely will be out, and Larry Borum, their starting right tackle, is just placed on the COVID list. So this is going to be interesting. And do you think this could be a long night for Justin Fields?
Yeah, I do, especially because Mike Zimmer is so good at dialing up blitzes. They lost Danielle Hunter in, I think it must have been like week 9, and then Everson Griffin hasn't been there. And they have, even though they've gotten those sack numbers, they have not consistently pressured the quarterback. For the most part, it's been quarterbacks getting clean pockets against them. If you look over the numbers from Roethlisberger, Jared Goff was hardly pressured at all in that Lions game. But the thing about Roethlisberger and Jared Goff is that those are veteran quarterbacks. Goff may be bad, but he's been around. And Roethlisberger may be bad, but he's been around. So it's not like you could just say, oh, well, we'll dial up some blitzes and that will mess with them, and then that'll be that. With Justin Fields, I think that he's really struggled with blitzes. The numbers bear that out. He's really struggled when under pressure. And I think the Vikings will do everything they can to mix up coverages, mix up their looks on third down. I mean, if you can get them to third down and long, especially, this is where Mike Zimmer is masterful. The Vikings have a bad defense, but their third down defense is still one of the better ones in the NFL because that's where Mike Zimmer can pretty much go into his bag of tricks. And I was looking up Mike Zimmer against rookie quarterbacks. His numbers are just remarkable over his time in Minnesota against rookie quarterbacks. Mitch Trubisky found that out in 2017 a couple of times with some really ugly games against the Vikings. And I think, that probably is going to be the case for Justin Fields unless he can make some big plays down the field early in first down or second down off of play action, which I don't think Chicago uses to its full effectiveness. If they can get in second and shorts with successful first down runs, like that's the thing that everybody wants to do. Like no one wants third and longs, but it becomes especially important with a rookie quarterback against a really masterful defensive mind.
You bring up Mike Zimmer, so I got to ask, if the Vikings do not make the playoffs this year, there have been talks, and mainly from fans, about the security of his job. If the Vikings do not make the playoffs, what is your prediction for Mike Zimmer? Will he be the coach of this team next year?
I don't think so. No, I think it's even possible that if they make the playoffs, he's not the coach of this team next year. I mean, if they go 8-9 and they get in because some other teams melt down and then they lose in the first round to Arizona or something, I think they're going to be looking for changes. One thing, I don't think that there's an easy path to rebuilding their defense. Like if you look at the cornerback position, they drafted a couple of bust first round corners. And so then they had to scramble and go get Patrick Peterson, Bashaud Breeland, Mackenzie Alexander. These are just guys. And they've really struggled this year. And so there's questions like, oh, did Zimmer not do enough? But when you have a quarterback that's expensive as Kirk Cousins and you've paid everybody, they've paid Thielen, Cook, Anthony Barr, Kendricks, Harrison Smith, you've given out all these big contracts. you either have to hit on draft picks or you have to hit on these, bottom of the barrel type of free agent signings. And they've really hit on neither one of those outside of Justin Jefferson. I guess Xavier Woods has been an okay signing, but not a difference maker. But these cornerbacks have just gone bust with the signings. And you look at it like, well, how do you fix this? How do you fix this next year? Well, the way to fix it would be to trade Kirk Cousins, draft another quarterback, and then sort of hit the entire reset button on your franchise. Is Mike Zimmer really a fit for that? Probably not. Can you give him a good enough defense if Cousins stays in win now mode? Probably not. So I think even from that perspective, even if you believe that Zimmer is a good coach, which I do think Zimmer is a good coach, he's much better than some of the bad coaches in the league. I can tell you that. Like when you're looking from afar at Urban Meyer or any of those guys, you're like, okay, guys, don't underestimate how good your coach is.
You can say his name, Matt. You can say it. You can say it. You can say his name. It's okay.
I can't because they're 5-1 against the Vikings with Matt Nagy. So you really can't. But you look at some of the bad coaches in the league and you say like, man, Zimmer's a lot better than a lot of these guys. There's a reason he's had his job so long. I just don't think it's a fit anymore. I think Zimmer would be a much better fit for a team that's just about to take a step to be a legitimate contender, and then he can elevate that team to get there. I'm not sure that he's a good fit for a team that really has to take a step back. And if they don't take a step back and reset in some way or another, you're going to end up just repeating history and being 8-9 or 9-8 next year. And what is the point of doing that? So I think that ownership is probably at that point where they know like this probably is it. And you have to change, even if they think that he's still a good coach.
Man, it must be nice to have ownership that knows when it's time to let go of a head coach. But I got to ask, because we always get a kick of talking about opposition special teams, especially considering right now for the Bears, that's their best unit. Can you give us a quick profile of the Vikings special teams? Is there a player that Bears fans should be looking out for?
Well, I would say yes, but the guy's on the COVID list, so there's one off. So the
COVID Bowl.
Actually, I mean, there's a few things to watch for here with the Vikings. I was referring to their gunner, who's not that important. It's really Kene Nwangwu is special. You know how good Cordero Patterson was. Well, Kene Nwangwu reminds me a lot of Cordero Patterson. He's big at 6 foot, over 200 pounds, but he's also a 4-3 guy. And he has a great sense for just all the moving parts to a kick return. And he's returned 2 for touchdown already. I suspect the Bears are going to be kicking out of the back of the end zone. But if you don't, he's got the green light to take it out, and he can take one back at pretty much any time. I would also say that just all of their units are better this year by wide margins from they were last year. You guys remember in the Chicago game, Mike Zimmer screaming at his special teams coach. Well, his former special teams coach was not good at his job. His current special teams coach, Ryan Ficken, is good at his job. So they've been good on all the coverage units. The returns have been good. D.D. Westbrook on the COVID list has been good in terms of punt return. I know punt returns, even if he's risky at times. But I would say other than Kene Nwangwu, the star of the show is Jordan Berry, their Australian punter that they picked up right before the season. I mean, he has a monster leg, and he has flipped the field a couple of times in really important situations that help them. I mean, that should be, it's super football-y to say, but like it's a big part. Like you've got a great punt returner, you've got a great punter, you've got good coverage units, you got a good kick returner on the Viking side. Like it could make a difference in a game like this.
Oh, it absolutely could, especially against a game where it could get real boring or ugly against the Chicago Bears. But I do want to ask you kind of a 2-part question. It's kind of it's a little game showy, but we're going to try it out anyway. The Bears can win this game if blank. The Vikings will win this game if blank. So go ahead and give the 2 scenarios for the 2 teams, how they're going to win the game.
Yeah, I would say the Bears can win this game if they strip sack Kirk Cousins, or if they cause a couple of turnovers, or if Cousins just doesn't play well. I mean, 3 out of the last 4 games, he has been below average for what we expect from him and from his PFF grades, his QBR, all those things. Like he hasn't been that great. So if there are turnovers, if there are strip sacks, if there's a bizarre interception, which you guys have seen before at times against the Chicago Bears, the one in 2018 at Chicago sort of comes to mind where he just floated the ball over Kyle Rudolph for an interception. I actually had 2 of them that were surprising that night. So there are times where Cousins just sort of has a moment and turns the ball over. I think that's possible. that Chicago can win the game that way. For the Vikings, I mean, it's entirely Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson. If those guys are succeeding, the Vikings can win, because I don't think that Chicago has any chance of matching the Vikings score for score if you get in that type of game. If it's a grind fest where Chicago is controlling the game and they're slowing down Dalvin Cook, then they've got a shot. But if they're not, like last year, really, they did not slow down Justin Jefferson. He completely dominated. The Vikings won. I think that's their path to winning again. I know that's not a hot take. Hey, if the best player on the Vikings is good, they'll win. There you go. But it's that's been the case all year.
And so with that said, before we go, I get your prediction for this game, although I think I know where you're leaning.
I mean, I think if you're the Vikings, you have to win this game. Your back is against the wall for the playoffs. And usually Mike Zimmer's teams do not just sort of lay down. They've had several different times this season where they could have. Even last week, they're blowing a lead. They find a way. They were coming off a loss against Detroit. They find a way to stick around. So I think they'll do that again, despite the curse that the Vikings have in Chicago. I mean, I don't know. I would go something like 27-13. Chicago's offense is just so poor that I think even a struggling Vikings defense can slow them down enough. That's what I'll go with. But I will say, it's been such a weird season for the Vikings. I've predicted every game wrong. Every single game. I think I might be 0 for the entire season with prediction. So now that I've said that, Chicago might win.
Well, we'll be honored to be the first game that you get correct, because I'm on the same, but I said 26-17 Vikings last night, and I'm going to stick to that one. But Matthew, before we get you out of here, we have a lot of fans that follow the NFC North very closely. Can you please let us know how people can follow you on social media, see your work, listen to you?
Sure. You've got it at the bottom there. At Matthew Coller on Twitter is the best place. Purple Insider on Twitter also is a good spot to find all of our stuff. We're tweeting out, clips and articles and things like that. And if you're interested in listening to the podcast, just wherever you get your podcast, type in Purple Insider and you will find it. And we'll have some Bears interviews and things like that coming up if people want to check it out.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, thank you so much. And not just for coming on, but for, for risking whatever. I hope you're staying safe down there for whatever weather you got going on down there. We truly appreciate you taking some time to break down the Minnesota Vikings for us. We'll talk to you down the road, but thanks so much for being on Buffone 55.
Sure. If it's the last thing I ever did, then at least it was football and I'll be happy. So
absolutely.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Please stay safe. We'll talk to you down the road.
Yep. Thanks.
We'll be back with more Buffone 55 after this. Welcome back to Buffone 55. John Buffone alongside Alyssa Barbieri. It is time for Buffone's Basement. That's why I have my hat turned around backwards, because I'm a hip, cool kid. Alyssa and I are going to walk down the stairs in the basement. We're going to dust off that old antique we call Aldo Gandia. Aldo, knock, knock, knock. Are you there?
I am here. How are you guys?
Doing pretty well. After listening to that interview with Matthew, are you feeling more confident, less confident about Monday night?
Oh, I'm the same. I think the Bears are going to lose. I don't think they're going to win another game this season. And my only concern now is the watch, meaning, watching for when the McCaskies are going to get off their butts and announce that they're doing something big.
Well, that's what I wanted to start off with, because I think today the owners voted on officially allowing the teams to interview. I think it was all formality for the most part, but they're going to allow teams to interview candidates for the last 2 weeks of the regular season. I know the Bears have never fired a coach in the middle of the season. Like I said before, maybe they should have. Maybe they should have fired Mark Trestman. Maybe they should have fired John Fox. Like this is some kind of badge of honor they wear by not firing people in the middle of the season. You need to move on as soon as possible. So do you think, Aldo, sway the franchise to say, you know what, a 2-week head start on everybody else might be good if we're going to start looking for candidates? Or does the whole thing with Ryan Pace kind of throw a wrench into things too?
Yeah, I think, I think the whole thing is bigger than the coach. So it really, Dan Wiederer wrote this great column that Alyssa pointed out to me. I think they need to make some moves at the very highest offices at Halas Hall, and that's the chairman of the board and the president of the team. The organization has to look at this 11-year run by George McCaskey and say, this isn't working, George. You had your run on it, just like your brother had your run on it. We're ready to make a change. And so they need to bring in a new chairman and a new president. In the Dan Wiederer article, he writes that apparently Ted Phillips has told confidants that maybe it is time for him to step to the side and bring in somebody with football knowledge to handle the part of the role that he handles with football operations. I'm not saying that he's going to go away completely, but I think that's the bigger issue here is, do the Chicago Bears from the very top realize that the upper management is not getting it done? And do they have the guts, the courage, the balls to make some dramatic moves? Because that's the only way you're going to win the confidence of fans. We're all tired of it. And it's moved beyond being tired. It's gone into apathy, and you're going to see a lot of empty seats Monday night, and rightfully so. So it's time that the Bears do something dramatic.
One thing that I found interesting about that, and Alyssa, you were all over this. Ted Phillips might consider stepping away from or hands off on the football side. But that's getting completely hypocritical of what was sold to the fan base at the end of last year, where George McCaskey said that Ted doesn't meddle with football operations. Yeah, he's the president, but he doesn't meddle with football operations. He doesn't have anything to do with football operations. They're just trying to downplay those rumors as much as possible. And now there's reports to say, oh, maybe I'll give up some of my control with football operation. Okay, so you're lying. Either if all of that is true, then you're lying. So Ted, the accountant, the tax guy, the guy who makes you money for the business side of the team, has been running football operations, and all of a sudden it took you 30 years to realize maybe we shouldn't have our accountant figuring out personnel on the football side. That's like asking my mechanic to set up my 401k. Like it's just not. You should not. You put the right people in place, which is why. Although you and I haven't beaten the drum for this about a VP of football operations. Now, yeah, they could certainly screw up that hire, but at least they would bring in somebody who knows football to screw up the football operations. I'd rather have a football guy screw up the football team than a tax guy screw up the football team. Mm-hmm. So, Alyssa, I'll come back to you on this. If Ted relinquishes whatever meddling or whatever he does, whatever the hell he does, because no one seems to know, but whatever he does. What do the Bears do then? Do they bring in that football person to be the football operations guy, and then they hire the GM, and then I'm saying guy, but it could very well be a woman as well. The football person to hire a GM and to hire a head coach.
Yeah, first off, I'll have an Aldo's drinking. I'm like, all of this conversation about it, it's just kind of like, I'll take some of that. But yeah, John, like what you were saying, I think at this point, like if they do decide to do that, which I mean, that's the first thing I thought of too, when he's like, oh, I'll step away. But at that press conference at the end of the year, they just continually insisted, no, he's not involved in football operations. So they're lying to us, which isn't really a surprise considering that's probably where Matt Nagy learned it at this point. But if he does step away from football operations officially, then yeah, you have to bring in a football guy. Like you said, John, if they get GM hire wrong and then he gets the head coach, well, at least you have a football guy that's making those mistakes. So, I mean, at this point, if that's being discussed, because there's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation about a front office restructure. It's not just one report, it's multiple things. So I think there's a very good likelihood that this is going to happen. It's going to be a lot of change this offseason. So I definitely think that that's an avenue that they could go, especially when these leaks are happening. You know that they're kind of gauging their reaction too, right? So I mean, at this point, the way the season has transpired, and when George McCaskey being in charge and Ted Phillips and just the mediocrity, the way this is all transpired, they have to try something else at this point, because if not, it's going to be the same thing over and over again. Another 4 years down the line, then you fire another GM and another head coach, and it's just a continuous cycle, and the team's not going anywhere. So, and poor Virginia, my goodness, get her a playoff one before she dies.
Yeah. And this is kind of running rampant amongst fans, especially Bears fans, the apathy. And we keep talking about that, the absolute apathy. Aldo, Alyssa, throughout our lifetimes, Aldo, you more so than us, but have seen some really bad Bears teams, have seen some really awful football being played. Has it ever been this level? Maybe not as far as bad football team, but as far apathy towards the team, where it just seems like, okay, they're probably going to lose whatever. Like, has there ever been that level of who cares whenever we're talking about the Chicago Bears? Did it ever hit that level in your lifetime, Aldo?
Unfortunately, it has, because I go way back to the 1960s, and we had games here in Chicago blacked out like week after week after week, because if the home games were not sold out, that 72 hours before game time, then the network was not allowed to broadcast that game to that city. And so this happened for 2 or 3 years, 1969, 1970, maybe 1971. And I had to listen to all the home games on the radio. So things were really, really bad back then, which is what motivated George Halas to bring in Jim Finks, because he saw the success that Finks had with the Minnesota Vikings and turning that expansion team into a quick winner. So, yeah, it has been this bad before. And I'd like to make a point regarding this Ted Phillips row that we were just talking about. In that article that Wiederer wrote, he said that, okay, so if you have somebody who is at that position, who is president of operations, and he's totally outside of football operations, he's left everything to Ryan Pace. Well, shouldn't that guy at least have input on managerial things? Maybe you should consider this, Ryan, or maybe you should consider that, or have you structured this correctly? Offering advice that would help the general manager be a better leader. And the other thing that was brought out by one of a former player is Ted Phillips having lunch and dinner and drinks with football people? Is he learning about football so that he can have better, more informed conversations with people? Well, we don't know that, because Ted Phillips has never consented to do an interview where we fans can kind of gauge what he knows and what he doesn't know. Probably because he doesn't know much and he doesn't want to reveal that. Like you said, John, he can probably balance our checkbooks really, really fast, but he obviously can't build a team really, really fast. So I apologize for taking the conversation off track, but I really wanted to share that.
No, you're absolutely right, though, because if he did do an interview, it would almost be like exposing himself of not knowing what he's doing. It's that old adage, and I'm going to screw this up royally, but it's like, it's better to keep your mouth shut and people assume you're stupid than to open your mouth and prove them right. So he's just going to just lay back and be like, say all you want, I know what I'm doing. But it's to the point now, whereas if you don't do a wholesale change, and it's, I see that the 60s and 70s did have some of those apathetic times, but now, listen, football is the main driver of professional sports in America now. Yep. So it's different. The whole atmosphere of this global game where people can watch from anywhere in the world. They can watch on their phones. They can watch on their computers, their TVs, anywhere in the world. They can watch this game now. All of a sudden, the Chicago Bears are not interesting to people who follow the Chicago Bears. And maybe that's my millennial speaking, where it's just like, holy crap, I'm bored. Maybe it's our small attention spans. Maybe it's just like, oh my God, if you're not going to change it now, I'm just, of course I'm going to watch the game. And of course I'm going to do a show about it, but it's getting increasingly hard to do shows about this team. It's getting increasingly hard to to talk about the same things every week about this team, because they seem that they just found their groove, and they're going to stick with that until January. So it's hard to just see the same thing over and over and over again and get excited about it, especially when it's so sub-average. So you're just looking at this product, and it's just baffling, because something that is honestly outside of, family and all this other stuff is my most favorite thing in the world as far as sports goes, and I'm becoming almost indifferent to it. And I hate that. I hate that so much that it angers me that they're doing this to me. I'm angry at the Bears for making me not care about the Bears. So there needs to be some sort of, and can you imagine being a player in that situation? And I think that a lot of the times we just assume that, players are nothing but football 24/7. And after the game on Sunday, they go back into their pretty packaging and they're on the shelf until Sunday again. And they're all about, there's these football robots. No, they're humans, and they can see exactly what's going on. They're in that culture where they're thinking, well, we're not making the playoffs. I wonder where I'm going on vacation, or I wonder where I'm going to be playing next year, or maybe I should keep myself healthy so I can get a contract next year. I don't want to blow out my knee for a 4-9 team. And so there's so many human aspects that go along with this, that if we're indifferent to it, I'm sure there are a couple players that are indifferent to it as well. I'm not saying all the Chicago Bears are indifferent to this losing. I'm sure most of them want to win. But whenever you're eliminated out of the playoffs, you maybe start thinking a little bit differently sometimes. And so I know in this whole long soliloquy that I'm giving you guys, it's me just saying that I'm mad that the Bears aren't actually doing something. I'm mad that the Bears didn't get a fire lit under their ass to actually make a change somewhere, and I'm hoping that happens. Alyssa, I'll ask you this though. I didn't get your answer whenever we first started it. Do you see Matt Nagy being here the entire season? Do you see him being here? Aldo says that. You said yes, right? Aldo,
I said it doesn't matter. We need to start at the top.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I think that he'll be here for the rest of the season, just because that Green Bay game kind of that was the perfect opportunity to make a change. That second half performance really just kind of like set the stage. It's like, okay, here you go. That's a second half meltdown. Again, your seventh loss to the Packers on national TV. Your organization's a disgrace. You're an embarrassment, and no change. And like you said, John, you want to see that, like, light a fire under their ass, and that's just like not there. And like you said, I mean, I was really excited watching the first half, but when they lost to the Packers, normally I'm like upset. And this time I was just like, eh. And that's like not good, because like that's not a response that a Bears fan should have when you lose to the Packers. It should be you're angry to a degree, right? And I was just like, eh. So I mean, but going back to the Matt Nagy of it all, I mean, unless there's just like an epic collapse against a bad team like the Giants, or if they just get blown up by the Vikings or the Seahawks, like, but even then we kind of saw them get blown up by the Packers, and it's, that the McCaskies don't like to lose to the Packers, and that still did nothing. So at that point, I'm going to just say he survives the season, because they kind of want to, just say they've never fired a head coach midseason.
Yeah, I was more mad about how late it was rather than the outcome of the game. Like by the time we got done doing our post-game show, although I think it was like my time, it was like 12:45 by the time I actually went to bed, and I'm thinking, man, I have to get up in 4 hours, and all because I had to watch that. Because I had to watch that game. So that's what actually got me more mad than the Bears actually losing. But Aldo, I don't know if you have it available, your spaceship graphic about the rest of the schedule, because you said there it is. Wow, that was quick. Good job. You said that you don't see them winning another game for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
you're looking at Vikings, Seahawks, Giants, Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think they're going to win any of those games?
I don't. Playing in Seattle is going to be tough. They should easily beat the Giants at home, but there is a disturbing trend going on with the team where their lack of depth is being exposed with all these injuries that they have. And I think that they have to put certain guys on the shelf for the rest of the season, because putting them in danger is something they probably won't want. Guys that are finishing up their contract. Allen Robinson, there's a rumor going around that Allen Robinson has been told by his inner circle, don't play, shut it down. And so that is probably happening with other guys too. Akeem Hicks really wanted to play in that Packers game. Why didn't he? Did his agent say, shut it down? So there's a lot of troubling things with this team that, to me, say it doesn't matter if they have a better team on paper. This team is going to lose because they just don't have the mojo going on right now.
Alyssa, they got to have a win in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, at first I was convinced that they were going to split with the Vikings, and they're going to beat the Giants. I mean, that's a home game. I mean, the Giants are probably going to have Mike Glennon at quarterback. And if the Bears lose to Mike Glennon, I don't know, maybe that's the game that you heard, Matt Becky.
Yeah.
But that would be perfect, right? It would be like, and Ryan Pace, it would be a complete full circle moment.
Yes.
Right? Lose to Mike Glennon, the guy you gave $18 million to start 4 games. So, yeah, I mean, I think that they're going to beat the Giants, but at this point, I wouldn't put it past them to lose, to be honest.
It'll be Mike Glennon's revenge game. Because it happens all the time against the Bears, right?
If they lose to the Giants at home, well, first of all, there's probably going to be about 45 fans there. But if they lose to the Giants at home, can you imagine the uproar that's going to be happening at Soldier Field? Maybe it won't happen inside the stadium because no one's going to be in there, but outside the stadium, there might be a little bit of an uproar. I honestly think they can split with the Vikings still. I still think they can split with the Vikings somehow, some way. And I think that they can beat the Giants. Maybe I can't believe I'm the optimist here. I can't believe that I'm the one that's saying that. But I think they got 2 wins left in them, which would give them a 6-11 record. So yeah, I see this as a comment. Ask John why I should continue to support this team. Oh, Isaiah, I wish I could tell you.
Oh, no.
You bought all that Bears paraphernalia, Isaiah. That's why.
There you go.
Well, yeah.
Justin Fields?
It's an investment. I mean, it's almost like investing in Enron at this point. But honestly, you're with this team through the bad and the good. And if you're a Bears team, you're with the more of the bad than you are the good. But you know what? We're always going to watch this team. We're always going to support this team. And you know what? Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy's and all the head coaches and the GMs, they're going to come and go. Players are going to come and go. The Allen Robinsons of the world are going to come and go. The one constant here, hell, even ownership comes and goes every once in a while. Maybe not with the Bears so much, but even in the professional football, owners come and go. But the one thing that remains constant is the fans are always here. The fans are always going to have this team, which is why, and if I can go on a little bit of a tangent, one of my biggest pet peeves in the entire world is when people try to gatekeep whether or not people can say we when they refer to their favorite team. I hate that. And when I say I hate that, I mean, go ahead and say we. Go ahead and say we. Because I don't say it much just because as a former journalist, we were told not to ever do that. And so it's just second nature to me now. But if you say we about the Bears, I don't care because you're involved with this team. You're saying we as in Chicago. You're saying we as in my team. And people that want to act holier than thou by saying, oh, how many tackles did you have in the game? Dude, you must be miserable at parties, by the way. You must just be an absolute miserable person to be around where you think that you have the high ground by saying you can't say we. Well, the same people that say, hey, whenever you're addressing a head coach of a football team, don't address them as coach. They're not your coach. Honestly, are you that miserable in your own being that you have to gatekeep how people actually talk about their team or address another person? That is one of my biggest pet peeves in the world. Go ahead and say we. I say we sometimes. You know why? Because the Chicago Bears pulled my Uncle Doug and the rest of the family out of poverty whenever there was a coal mining family out of Western Pennsylvania. The Bears are part of me. So you know what? I'm going to say we. Just like they're part of everybody else that's on this show, listening to the show, and in the Chicago, or anyone else that supports the Chicago Bears, go ahead and say we. I don't care. But wow, I really went off a tangent. But you know what? We have to do this on Bears podcast because we need stuff to talk about. But
that's right.
I don't even remember what the hell we were talking about.
This is more exciting than the games usually are. So just keep going.
Oh, why you should support this team? Let me get back into my sedentary mode here where I'm turning into a zombie. But No, you're going to support this team no matter what, and we're going to see some changes, hopefully wholesale changes in the offseason. We just have to make it until January. And you know what? The part that sucks the most is, I'm not trying to get overly existential here, but whenever you look at it, it's like we only get so many Bears seasons in our lifetime. Some of us are in our 50th year watching the Bears. Some of us are in our 15th year watching the Bears, and everything in between. You only get so many of them. So you hate to see one go to waste. I think that's why fans get so angry, because it's just another year wasted where your team doesn't look like a competitor. And it's going to happen, especially if there's a rebuild where it's like, this is a 2 to 3 to 4 year process. Fans are going to hate that because they don't want to waste another year of fanhood watching a team that they know is not going to be competitive. Is that necessary sometimes to put a good product on the field? Absolutely. But I think people get so fired up about this because they don't want to see another 8 months of their life just, I don't want to say wasted, but in the sports realm, wasted, because you wait all year for football season. As soon as the Super Bowl is over in February, we start thinking about the draft. And after the draft, we start thinking about rookie camps. We start thinking about OTAs. We start thinking about training camp. We start thinking about preseason. We start thinking about week 1. And we get amped up about football season all year round. And whenever it's blatantly obvious that your team has no business being a competitor, is not a competitor, you get angry because you invest so much emotionally into it. You put so much of yourself into it. I know as soon as the Bears drafted Justin Fields, I started getting my Bears gear out. Normally I don't put that stuff back on until around the summertime because it's not really football season, but man, was I pumped up about Justin Fields. Man, was I pumped up about the Chicago Bears. And then whenever you have things just fall flat on you, you're like, damn, another season down the tubes, nothing really to show for it. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to have a winning record. The head coach is probably going to get fired. The GM probably going to get fired. What changes they're going to make? But I can tell you one thing, though. When that happens, let's just say it happens January 10th. I think that's the day after the regular season. If that happens January 10th, the excitement for the Chicago Bears are going to skyrocket again. You know why? Who's going to coach the Bears? Who's going to be the GM of the Bears? Who are they going to go get in free agency? Who are they going to draft? I know they don't have a first-round pick, but who are they going to get with that second-round pick? Sure. And it's going to start all over again. And it's a 365 days of emotional investment. And that's why, and that's why we're here. And that's why everybody else that's listening and watching this show is here. So that's why you should support this team, because there's always going to be a reason to get excited. You just got to probably have to wait until in the second week of January this year.
Oh my gosh, John has me feeling optimistic about the Bears. Like,
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. I blacked out. I'm sorry.
So weird.
And there is the potential of Justin Fields being a transformative quarterback.
Sure.
And he has made his fair share of rookie mistakes, and that's depressed a lot of people and have some fans questioning his future. But I think, anyone who with reason and patience can look at this guy and say, wow, he's got all the tools. There's just a couple of mechanical things that he has to work out. And hopefully if he's surrounded with a better offensive line and more offensive weapons, this guy could be a really fantastic quarterback for the next 10, 15 years for this team. So that's one reason for hope. And it's a big if, because it is what it is. He's not there yet. But to me, I find him a really intriguing storyline to follow, and everything he says, everything he does, we're all hoping that he says it correctly and he does it even better.
And considering the Bears haven't had success, the only thing that we've had is hope, right? Like whether it was back when Trubisky was drafted, or with Justin Fields, or with the young talent in place, like. That's all we have, because we have to hope that the Bears eventually get there, even though in the back of our minds, we kind of know that it's going to kind of be the same thing. But when you go out and, like John said, when they drafted Justin Fields, I was jumping up and down, standing right over here watching my TV. Like, it was exciting. It was that's something that doesn't happen a lot, especially when you're down on the team and there's not really much to look forward to, and they go out and make a move like that. It gives you hope, which is something that we haven't had and we don't have a lot of right now. But I think Fields is enough reason to kind of just, be hopeful or optimistic for the future. And hopefully they get the right guy around him to coach him up and get the right talent around him. So, I'm still optimistic because of Fields. So.
Yeah.
And I said this because we've been doing this show a while now. And so I said this when they drafted Trubisky, and it was Trubisky's rookie season, and they looked bad. It was the last year of John Fox, and this team looked just awful. I remember saying on this show, at least there's something to look forward to. Can you imagine if they wouldn't? Because I wasn't a huge Trubisky supporter, and I didn't love the draft pick, quite frankly. But I remember saying, can you imagine if they didn't draft a quarterback this year and we just had to go through the entire season watching Mike Glennon play quarterback for the Chicago Bears? Can you imagine that year? There would have been absolutely no reason to watch that team, much like this year. If they wouldn't have been able to draft Justin Fields and they decided they were going to go with Andy Dalton for the duration of this season, can you imagine there's not even hope? There's not even a reason to watch because you can't see your franchise quarterback develop or get better or progress or whatever you want to call it. At least, like you said, Alyssa, there's a reason to be hopeful. And so we had that in 2017, clearly did not work out. But we have it again in 2021. I have a better feeling about this one. I have a much better feeling about this being the quarterback. So there's always a reason. You can always find something to be hopeful. Maybe as Bears fans, we have to program that into our brain to say, what is there to be hopeful for? It's not going to be the win-loss record, but what is there to be hopeful for with this franchise? So we're going to have to keep doing that at least for the next 4 weeks. Although you're just the negative Nancy here. They're not going to win another game according to you.
I know this is very weird. That's normally our angle.
I gave them 2 wins. How am I the most optimistic for this team to really rally and get 6 wins for this year?
You ever see that movie Freaky Friday where the mother and daughter change personalities? I think maybe that's what's been going on here.
It's gonna be. I'm sure the Giants are loving this because they get the Bears' first round pick, and the worse the Bears are, the better their first round pick is going to be. So. The Giants will have motivation to beat the Bears. If they beat the Bears, it's even further down in the draft order that they get a much higher pick. So we'll see. There's always something. Right, they're at number 5.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, you know what? I'm glad they got Justin Fields. I'm not going to be like, oh, I wish they wouldn't have done that because I do. And you look at the quarterbacks in this year's draft class. There ain't no Justin Fields in that draft class. So they did what they had to do, and I'm glad they did it because I don't know if there's anybody at 5 that was going to come close to what they can have in Justin Fields. So it is what it is.
Todd McShay of ESPN released his first mock draft, and he's got 5 quarterbacks going in the first round, but all 5 of those quarterbacks are rated behind the top 5 quarterbacks that went in this past draft. So he's got Justin Fields ahead of the 5 quarterbacks that are coming out in this draft. And so that was we criticize Ryan Pace, but that was actually one of the few brilliant moves that he made was trading up with the Giants to acquire that pick and pick up Justin Fields. That could be his lasting legacy when this team is winning Super Bowls in 5 years and Justin Fields is the quarterback. People might remember, wasn't it Ryan Pace that drafted Justin Fields?
It's be a trivia question.
That's right, exactly.
When he's long gone.
Long gone.
I was going to ask, who are the 5 teams that are going to be drafting a quarterback, though? I mean, I don't know. You have that in front of you, who he has? Yeah.
I actually don't have it in front of me, but and which is one of the reasons why the first quarterback off his mock draft, I think it was at 15, because the first 14 teams weren't in dire need of a quarterback other than the Lions, but there's clearly no quarterback coming out in the draft who's worth the first overall pick. And he had Sam Howell going to the Lions with their 29th pick of the first round because they've got 2 first rounders.
Yeah, I'm just looking over the NFL right now, and I guess you could say the Denver Broncos will probably be looking for a quarterback at some point. The Steelers could be, the Saints could be, the Texans, although they did use their highest pick this year on Davis Mills, even though he was a 3rd rounder. Well, maybe they want to see where that goes. I suppose Washington would be looking for a team.
Washington, and then the fifth, I think, was Philadelphia, because he thought that Jalen Hurts has made a lot of progress this season, but not enough to say he's the future. Let's bring in another young guy in case Hurts doesn't work out in his third season.
Oh, you mean drafting a quarterback every year? Oh, man.
Much like, that is a page out of Ryan Pace's book that he never decided to open. But you could even say the Giants could be in the market for a quarterback. If they get a new GM or they decide to move on to the head coach, maybe Daniel Jones is not what the new regime would want. Maybe they move on. So I guess at first I didn't think there was going to be 5 teams that would actually need a quarterback, but apparently there's always 5 teams that need a quarterback in the NFL because it's the most coveted position in all professional sports that you got to get right. It's probably the most important position in professional sports that you got to get right, because if you don't have it, because I think the Denver Broncos are a really good quarterback away from being a real contender. I think as much as people tend to criticize Vic Fangio as a head coach, I think that team is really good across the board, except for the most important position on the field. So if they would go out and get an Aaron Rodgers in the offseason, I think that they could potentially be seen as a Super Bowl contender. Yeah, I hope he goes.
That's another thing to be hopeful for, though, right? Is that this is Aaron
right.
Rodgers' last year in Green Bay.
How about his interview with the Pat McAfee show, where he said, they said, "Do you love being a Packer?" And he paused for about 6 really awkward seconds and said, "I just love playing ball." And so, I mean, listen, I think Aaron Rodgers is taking every avenue to keep the spotlight on himself because he knows that's leverage. And so whenever he puts his toe up to the camera during a press conference, or he talks about these cryptic things about how he loves to play ball and all this other stuff. I think that and especially when Jordan Love had to start a game and it did not go as well as they were hoping it would go. So I think that Aaron Rodgers just loves all this leverage that he keeps pulling up, and they're in line to be at least a Super Bowl contender. If they make a deep run, I don't know. It sounds like he loves to have options. It sounds like he loves to be able to choose his own destiny in a sport that doesn't always allow you to do that. So I think that he's taking every opportunity to soak this up. I think he's probably having more fun this year than he has any other year. And maybe that's because he knows he controls his future in the NFL. So if I had my way, I'd love to see him in Denver. Go ahead, and I don't want to send him to Pittsburgh, really, because that would just be Pittsburgh's luck to get Aaron Rodgers after Ben Roethlisberger all those years. No, they shouldn't get him. Send him to Denver. Send him to it's going to be a team that, because whoever goes and gets Aaron Rodgers is going to have to give up like 3 first-round picks because they're gonna have to deplete themselves of draft picks. So it's whoever is an Aaron Rodgers away from the Super Bowl, and that's why I thought that Pittsburgh and Denver made sense, because they kind of have the talent in place to be a good contender. They just needed to shore up the quarterback position. So I can't see a rebuilding team like the Texans going out and getting Rodgers, nor would he want to go there, to be honest with you, because he's going to have a little bit of say on where he gets traded. And I don't think they want to send him to the NFC, so I don't see him being in New Orleans, even though they are probably a quarterback away from, being a real Super Bowl contender. I don't think Green Bay is going to trade him within the NFC either. So I can see him going into the AFC, and the teams that are probably best set to compete right away with him would be Pittsburgh or Denver. I assume Carson Wentz is going to stay in Indianapolis for another year, so probably not there. Can't see him really in Tennessee.
Yeah,
Las Vegas. I don't know, but
Vegas is a possibility. Alyssa wrote in Bears Wire that Aaron Rodgers actually gave a compliment to Justin Fields. Isn't that right, Alyssa?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he did. It kind of felt like he was passing the torch too, right? Like maybe that's his exit, right? From the NFC North. He's like, okay, kid, your turn. And I'm good with like Aaron Rodgers going anywhere outside of the NFC North, just so we don't have to play him twice a year. Like I will be happy with that, but I do see him going to the AFC. But yeah. I mean, that was because when someone like Aaron Rodgers kind of sees the star qualities, the star potential in someone like Justin Fields, I mean, that's special. And this isn't like a press conference where he's kind of like prompted, like when you're playing a team that week and you have to say something nice, even though you might not need it, mean it. So, I mean, you know, him kind of going out of the way and kind of, you know, praising Fields for that. And, you know, and kind of like giving him a tip in a way. And he was kind of like saying, this is what you need to be, or what you need to do to be successful, right? Focus on one area of improvement every year. That's also what veterans do. Like, I mean, that was nice of Aaron. I never thought I'd say those words, but that was pretty nice of Aaron to say that about Justin. So, I mean, we'll see if he's right, and hopefully that's the case. But like John, I feel confident that they'll get it right this time.
I hope so.
Yep.
Let's hope.
Well,
we have to hope.
Yeah, we have to. And we just turned this whole Bears podcast, especially this segment, into let's just talk about the NFL because it's more exciting than the Chicago Bears. So we were able to.
We need some news to come out of Halas Hall because, you know, once McCaskey talks or Pace talks, there's going to be a lot for us to talk about, to dissect and to speculate on. So, but right now, you know, we're talking about a dead fish. There it is.
Yeah.
There's a dead fish there. Okay.
Every week.
That's right.
Same thing every week.
The amount we've won one game in 66 days. Dan Weaver wrote in that article. How painful is that? One game in 66 days. That should not happen in professional sports to any team, much less the Bears, the charter franchise of the National Football League. It's at this point, it's almost as if Roger Goodell needs to step in and say, okay, Mr. McCaskey and Mr. Virginia McCaskey, we've got a problem here. So I brought in the health department to clean things up here. So there has to be something done because it's not good for the NFL when, you know, the Chicago Bears, who usually draw very, very well when they're on national TV, when they're playing this poorly, you're going to lose television audience. And so the NFL should probably get involved too, and at least, you know, point out certain things that Bears management has to do. And that starts with making some changes at the very top.
That's why Peyton and Eli refused to do their Monday night games. This is the second straight Monday night game. They're like, we want no part of that. Although I would love that. I mean, they should want to kind of do that game where they can kind of talk. There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I'm shocked that they didn't want to, you know, talk about Rodgers. Maybe it was because of Rodgers that they didn't want to talk about, but I'm surprised they didn't want to talk about Rodgers and Fields. And that was a bit disappointing. I was hoping to hear their comments on that.
They and by they I mean the Chicago Bears have lost 7 of their last 8, and that's going back to their last win. Not their last win, but after beating the Raiders on October 10th. Remember that fun time? They were like, "Oh, maybe they're not terrible." They've lost 7 of 8. 7 of 8 since October.
And now
10th.
they beat the Lions, and that they should have lost that game. They should have lost to the Lions. So like their last one was, how many days is that from the Raiders win?
Whatever October 10th is. So what half a year? I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
30 days, I think. But yeah, I agree. And I was at the Bears-Lions game at Soldier Field, and the Lions did everything possible to give that game away. They were in the red zone multiple times, and they had stupid decisions, botched plays, and so forth. And the Lions could have easily have beaten the Bears twice this season. The only legitimate win I think that the Bears had this season was the win against the Cincinnati Bengals week 2. Outside of that, you know, they could have easily lost every other game on the schedule, and it's frustrating. I don't see there being light at this tunnel unless they make the major moves. If they come back again, you know, if they come up, they have a press conference and say, listen, we know you're not going to like this, but we did see some progress because of this young player and that young player and that young player. Then, you know, maybe we should, you know, just talk about booze here at the Barroom Network and not Bears.
Yeah. There'll be nothing to talk about anymore. There will be nothing to talk about because we've been almost doing the same show for 2 years now, where it's just like there's a couple wrinkles here and there, but essentially we've been talking about the same thing for 2 years. And so if you would have told me at the beginning of the season, who would see this as a worse loss, if the Bengals lose to the Bears or the Bears lose to the Bengals, who would regret that loss more? I would say, man, if the Bears lose to the Bengals, that could really keep them out of the playoffs. Now the Bengals losing to the Bears, they're going to look back and be like, oh my God, we lost to the Bears, and that's what's going to keep us out of the playoffs. We lost to the Bears way back in, what was that, September or whatever it was. So it's like, it's I mean, we hit new lows, but when you think about it, holy crap, we beat our best win at the end of the year might end up being the Bengals. Like who's their best win? Because right now, I don't know if any of those teams, certainly not the Lions, but like, is it Vegas or Cincy? I don't think either one of them are technically in the top 7 right now. Are they, as far as playoffs go? The Bengals might be flirting with it.
Yeah, I think the Bengals
they might be in.
Yeah.
Okay, so their best win this year might be the Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah. Would you believe that going into the season?
No. That was one of the games early in the schedule. You should beat them easily because that's not a playoff team yet. But Joe Burrow is finally getting it going, and I'm looking at they're 4-2 at away. So the Bears actually handed them one of the 2 losses of the 6 games that they've won on the road. I mean, they're 4-2 away, so the Bears handed them one of those 2 losses, which is pretty good. The Bengals are in a bit of a losing streak here. They're 7-6, having lost 2 in a row, so they're maybe knocking themselves out of the playoff race, but technically they're still in it.
And I think they have if I remember correctly, they play the Broncos this week, which is a huge game because both of those teams are 7-6, and that's I don't want to call it an elimination game because a lot of those teams still have a bunch of divisional games, but that's a big game as far as wild card implications because then there's the head-to-head tiebreaker, and you're obviously one game in, so that's going to be a big game. You know, it's bad because listen, I love playoff football. I adore NFL playoff football. It is so exciting. I just wish we could talk about the Bears when it comes to that. I wish it could be. I wish that we could talk about our team in there because I love talking about scenarios and who has to beat who and who has the tiebreaker here. It's just like it gets my blood pumping. I think it's just interesting. I love it. I'm super passionate about. We're coming down to the last. So we got to win this one. We got to win this one. Everything's on the line because the games mean so much more now. Because now it's just like win and you're in, or loser goes home. And you know what? The Bears went home in October. So it's like it sucks that we can't have that talking about our team, but I still love playoff football. We're getting closer and closer to it. I guess it starts a week later now because there's 17 games, but still, just a fun time to be a football fan. Even if you're a Bears fan, if you're a football fan, it's still fun to watch. So we got Saturday games this week. We got there's 2 games on Saturday. I think Patriots and Colts and Browns and
Raiders.
The
Raiders.
COVID Bowl.
Yeah. If they don't move
COVID
the game,
Bowl
there's so many players on the COVID list. I mean, I don't know if they're going to start moving games or not, but we will see. But hey, guys, we ended up going about an hour and 45 on this podcast, and we haven't really talked about the Bears in about the last half hour. So
not surprised.
Cool.
we might have to take this formula moving forward, depending on what happens on Monday night. But we're having more fun just talking football than we are Bears. And I'm sorry if our listeners are like, get back to the Bears. And at this point, if you're really asking us to get back to the Bears, come on, man.
That's right.
You're brand new.
Yeah. But let's shut this down. Before we head out, I just want to thank each and every one of you for listening and watching this show, whether it's the live version or the podcast version, the video version, or the audio version. This is just really fun, and you can tell by us just sometimes I forget that we're broadcasting live or we're doing the show because we're just talking about football. We love doing that, so make sure you tune in to all the programs here at the Barroom Network. We got great Bears programming all throughout the week. We got this show on Wednesday, the Bear Debate on Tuesday with myself and Tyler Ellis, Greg Gabriel on Monday, breaking down the Bears' performance and the Bears' future. Of course, Bear Football, the post-game show with Aldo, with Tyler Ellis, and myself will be on directly after the Monday night game. I'm going to have to stay up until like midnight again watching the Chicago Bears. Alyssa, you're going to be in the same boat as well. And Danny Shimon going to be on tomorrow on Thursday, breaking down the tape, telling us what the Bears did right, telling us what they did wrong, probably a lot more of the latter. But once again, appreciate everyone who listens to this show. We've been doing it for a long time, and we just it just baffles me that people are still listening to us talk football. I love it. It's fantastic. Alyssa, before we get out of here, what do you got going on? You know what? You tell us a little bit about what you're working on. I'm always spewing about what we got going on here. Tell people to go to Bears Wire. Read a real journalist.
Right.
Yeah, if you head over to Bears Wire, I mean, we're getting ready for the game, but I do have a lot of kind of off-season stuff. I just posted 10 coaching candidates to replace Matt Nagy. Got the Ted Phillips stuff up there. Going to be kind of grading the rookie. I'm like kind of doing kind of like postseason stuff like already, but kind of like hinting towards the end. A lot of speculation. So we got you covered. If you're ready to kind of delve into what's going to be a pretty busy off season, maybe even an exciting off season, who knows? So check it out over at Bears Wire, and make sure you let me add that the best way to stay informed about all the great things happening here at the Barb Room is to follow us on social media at Barb Room Network, and you can find us all across social media, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, or here on YouTube.
Excellent stuff.
That was it all. I'll just say this: Science Fiction at 9 p.m. in about 15-20 minutes. The guys are going to talk about all the latest science fiction movies. They've got a good show planned. I know that. But so that starts in about 15-20 minutes and should go an hour or so.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much once again for tuning in. We'll be back. We'll try to put a positive spin on something next week. But for Aldo Gandia and Alyssa Barbieri, I'm John Buffone. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Bye.